Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, people. Good morning and welcome to Points of View once again on this Sunday morning. So much has been happening in education this week, and we're going to be picking out a few of the bigger stories and issues and talking points that have been coming up. And this morning, I'm joined by Tarjinder and Lucy, and I'm Tom, and we're going to talk about some of those issues. Before we do that, big shout out to our sponsors this morning, John Catt Educational. If you haven't heard of John Catt, head over to the John Catt Bookshop. Which is actually going to be included in the Hachette website, I believe, pretty soon. So head over there and check out what they've got available. They're a fantastic publisher with so many books for teachers and resources for teachers in general. And you can get 20% off at the moment by using the code JCTTR2425 at the John Catt Bookshop. Also, if you haven't heard of our newsletter yet, please go over there and sign up. It's really easy and it takes 10 seconds. ttradio.org/newsletter. Put your email in. You'll get a nice little newsletter from us once a week with our 4 best pick shows and lots of other stuff in there too. So, Lucy and Tarjinder, we're going to start off with the story that we really can't ignore this week. And it was covered by all the major media. Now, we're going to talk more broadly about culture days in schools this morning. So let me sort of give people the overview of what happened if you missed it. There was a diversity day at a secondary school in Warwickshire that ended in upsetting apologies after a 12-year-old girl wearing a Union flag dress was prevented from delivering a speech that she'd written about British culture. Pupils at the school were invited to take part in a culture day dedicated to recognising and celebrating the rich cultural diversity within the school community. Children were encouraged to wear outfits that reflected their nationality or family heritage to the event. The school also asked families to fill in a form to ask them what they were intending to do. One of the students, and we won't name the student or the school on the show this morning, we'll just talk more generally, but one of the students who is a year 7 pupil wore a Union flag dress, which was similar to one worn by the Spice Girl Geri Halliwell in 1997. And she turned up to school, and to cut a long story short, she was prevented from making a speech. I think she was moved to the reception area. Dad came to pick her up, and obviously the dad then went to, I think it was Facebook last Friday maybe, and just put out a post saying, "On the way to collect my daughter from school. She's currently being made to sit in reception waiting for me. The reason, it's Cultural Diversity Day at school where children can wear clothing representing their culture and write a speech about their heritage. She's been told it's not for her as she gets to celebrate being British every day." And the school itself made a statement, and they said they deeply regret the distress it caused. They offered sincere and unreserved apologies. They've spoken directly to the pupil and the family. They're committed to learning from the experience and ensuring that every student feels recognised and supported when expressing pride in their heritage. So, Lucy, any thoughts on this one first off the bat?
Yes. So I would say that we need to be really mindful if we're going to set up any of these particular days. I remember there was a 60s day when my eldest son was at primary school, and it caused so much stress in our house because there were some kids who wanted to wear, their mums had sewn patchworks into, to make flares and all kinds of things. Some kids really love these things, and for others, it's a really, really stressful event. And I think that's the first thing to note. I don't think you have to invite people in wearing cultural items, for example, to celebrate culture. When I worked in a primary school in 2005, the teacher had lived in India. She was British, but she'd lived in India. She's back there now. She loved it. She loved the culture. So she cooked Indian food for the children, different, beautiful little treats and things like that. and she put bindis, is it, on their foreheads, and they just learned about what those things meant. And I don't see why it can't be done like that, because the mistake the school made effectively was not stipulating that, we're only looking for cultures that are non-British. And of course they weren't going to do that, because if they did that, that would have had an outcry in itself. But in their heads, that was what they were expecting. And the reality was that it wasn't practical. Of course, other children wanted to wear things that they felt celebrated their culture. That dress was associated with the Cool Britannia movement, which was part of British culture. The 90s were a big time where we really celebrated being British. So the school handled it really badly, is what I would say.
I mean, the thing what I was thinking is, it's how you define, because I think one of the comments that were made is the difference between culture and national identity. And I think there can be blurred lines there. I mean, it's, to say, what are we defining as cultural dress? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a bit of a sort of, where do you go from that? Tarjinder, any thoughts on it?
I mean, this is kind of the inevitable conclusion that sort of slightly woke policies will end up with, okay? Because essentially what they're doing is they're being exclusionary. They are. And if you've got white British children in the school, what do you expect them to do? Do you expect them not to do anything? And also the idea that, oh, well, you get to celebrate Britishness every day. I mean, it's kind of, again, it goes along those lines of, white men, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, you get to have this privilege all the time. And it's like, well, actually, if you've got a cultural identity, you get to have that privilege all the time as well. Like, I don't, do you see what I mean? It's not like, okay, it's not like I don't celebrate being like from an Indian background every day, because I don't feel the need, but it's not like it's gone. And you're right, there are blurred lines, because obviously, I was born in England, and my family's from India. So there is a bit of a blurred line there between culture and nationality and all that sort of stuff. But actually, in the end, if that had been me, I should have been allowed to do that, because I can imagine going either route, and that should have been fine. And you've got all these children who are mixed race or mixed heritage. What do you expect them to do? Do you expect them just to pretend they're not, and they have to go down the ethnic route rather than this other route, even though, one of the parents is from Britain, or is white, and the other parent isn't? What do people want these children to do? It seems really confused on their basis, based on them, because of their ideological concerns. But actually, their ideological concerns should not be anywhere near a school in the first place. If you're going to do something like this for personal development, to develop their knowledge, like Lucy was saying, great, by all means. I think there's nothing wrong with that. When I was in primary school, when it was like Diwali, for example, because there's quite a lot of Sikh and Hindu children in the school, we were allowed to wear sort of like a Punjabi suit or whatever, and come in and have a sort of special day then as well. But we were also encouraged to sort of celebrate Christmas, celebrate Easter, it wasn't this thing where it was one group and not the other. And I think my head teacher was quite conscious of that, because that's important, because it is part of your background. Too, if you're born here, it is part of your background too, like the British heritage. It's not a way that apart from you. I don't see how you can, and I don't think you should encourage that either, because actually, if we're talking about having a sense of belonging, well, then that only comes from acknowledging the reality.
I mean, I did see some commentary on social media around this, and there was a few people were saying, well, there's a few points actually raised. One was, and I sympathise with this a little bit, in the sense that, this may have been, there was a lot of criticism towards the father in this instance, right or wrong, there was. And personally, there is that inkling in me that says, was this a bit of a hit job on this, in terms of something that was a little bit planned, in the sense of, knowing what exact. Now, I'm not suggesting the rights or wrongs of what actually happened, right? But there was a lot of commentary saying, was this a bit of a setup job? As in, they knew exactly what they were doing. Not the girl, right? But, it was almost a situation. And then afterwards, the big sort of fanfare sort of started from a media point of view. I don't know. That was point number one. Point number two, somebody said that somebody was asking what could. So they were saying that the whole thing about nationality and culture, the nationality cultural thing, and somebody asked what could someone have worn that represented British culture, right? And a person said, well, maybe Victorian wear, like the top hat and the like thing.
That's
Instead
history, not culture.
That's history. Yeah, no, exactly. Like I wouldn't, if we want to
I know. I'm just trying to highlight sort of the not the absurdity, but I'm trying to highlight, how people are almost trying to avoid like the sort of Union Jack wear, essentially, by sort of any means. I don't know. I mean, there's 2 points from me. Point one is, was this a bit of a sort of hatchet job on the school a little bit, and maybe some wider political motivations behind it? And my other point two, is around, do you think, I actually agree with you. I think that the Union Jack dress, Spice Girls, Girl Power, Cool Britannia, all that stuff, is part of British cultural identity. There's always that view, isn't there? Yeah, sorry, go on.
Don't forget that in the 1990s, because I was like around at that point. Do you know what I mean? Like those of us who were around at that point know that it wasn't like the Union Jack was this kind of exclusionary like flag, like it had been like kind of had been.
This was like pre-Culture Wars.
Yeah, but it's also pre-Culture Wars. But I think the idea was at that point in time was actually, like Lucy says, we really celebrated being British, right? Like regardless of what background you were from. It was the bands, it was the the Spice Girls, it was all these things, and actually I didn't feel excluded. And it was almost like a reclaiming of the flag, like going, actually it's our flag, it's all of our flag, and it doesn't just belong to a small group of racists who like to fly it around. Actually, we shouldn't think about it that way. And I think this is going backwards, not forwards for me, because now we're saying once again it belongs just to a small group of people. Well, I mean, if I want to fly the British flag, I should be allowed. I was born here. Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't see why I should have a problem with that, because it is the flag of the place that I'm from. Like it's like the English flag. Actually, if you just give it to the racists, that's your choice. That's not. It's not about the flag.
The father didn't fill in the form, did he? He didn't fill it. The school asked everybody to fill in a form and say, "What are you going to do?" Now, the school may have said no on the basis of the form, right? We don't know. It's speaking in hindsight. But he didn't fill it in.
Do that anyway. Why would you want them to fill in a form? Because
I
that's our thing to do. Secondly, it's like actually the comment that was made, even if the dad did set it up, and I can imagine some of these incidents are going to happen more often now, precisely because people are going about these things in the wrong way. Like because it's ideological and people are getting their information from different sources as far as they're concerned, and particularly because the woke do not debate anything, because as far as they're concerned, debate is racist, right? Or whatever, they can't see it from any other perspective than their own, and they're not listening to go, actually, hang on, what do other people think? How do they feel about it? It's quite a narcissistic movement in that regard. And I'm not saying they're wrong about some of the problems they're trying to solve, but I don't think they go about solving them in the right way at all. And this is one of those examples, okay? Why would you have a day in a school where you're going to exclude all the white British children? Why would you do that? What good would come of that? It makes no sense to me.
Well, if they didn't have, the idea of having a form for a start suggests to me that the school knew that there could be problems with this and that they should have communicated that better. I didn't know about the form actually, so I find that quite interesting. It suggests that they wanted to decide, please make your suggestions as to what you're wearing and we'll let you know if they're good enough or not. And I think that's a terrible thing. I think that they knew that this was problematic. I think, you say, did the parents set this up? Maybe the school set it up, I'm not saying they did, but, anybody who was involved in that was going to have a difficulty unless they had a cultural...
Unless they're ethnic. That's what you're saying. Unless brown or black, you don't get to have a culture, and that is ideological statement, because that's the other thing that people like to go down that route, who've got that particular sort of ideological outcome, is that, oh, well, we don't really have a culture like over here. And when quite clearly there is a British culture, they like to like denigrate it to that extent. And actually, if you're going to go down that route, that's personally, if you want to go down that route, that's one thing. But to bring it into a school and to bring it onto the children, I just think is completely wrong. It shouldn't be happening.
Do you think though, and again, this is me not sort of, because, you know, there's a lot of abstract concepts, I guess, around British culture that aren't necessarily visible, okay? But would you say that there is that thing of, at face value, right? Someone might look at, I don't know, football shirts, the Jerry Halliwell dress, and I also read that in this particular example, somebody, and again, this could have been a lie, but I think the father said that somebody had turned up like dressed as a farmer with like a flat cap on and like, you know, like dressed as like this, like with a flat cap and whatever. And again, that we don't know if that's true or not, because, you know, let's not get into, because he's allowed to say whatever he wants, but we don't know the absolute fact. We do know some of the facts, but not all of them. But my point is that, okay, some of the, and again, this might be the view of it, but you might look at it and go, well, that's a more serious gesture. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. That's a more serious gesture on a more serious take on culture or cultural identity. And the football shirts and the Jerry Halliwell dress and dressed as a farmer, you know, they might look at that and say, well, what is, you know, that's not really serious. That's just, you know, sort of tacky, if you like. Again, I'll probably get battered for that, but that I'm just presenting a viewpoint that someone might look at it and say that's not meaningful.
But then that shows a lack of understanding of other cultures. Sorry, but it shows a lack of understanding of other cultures as well. Because what makes you think that there's not tacky outfits that you could wear if you were from an Indian background? Like, of course there are, right? Of course, there's things that you could wear that look tacky, or that maybe less serious, and other things. You know, like, you know, you could argue the toss on this for all sorts of things. So really, they needed to have stopped and thought about what it is they were expecting to cut as a result of this. What do they actually want to celebrate? What do they actually want people to talk about? Because clearly they didn't want to talk about being British or that being a cultural identity, but that's not for them to impose. Because if you're going to say that, again, if you're going to create a situation like that, you're basically excluding certain children, and that's not appropriate for a school to do that. You've got to think of ways of including people, right? So like I said, when we used to have our Diwali days, it was a way of actually, but we actually did, like, you know, like the mums would come in, they'd have made samosas or like have Indian sweets and stuff. And actually there was this kind of cultural exchange there, because actually we were learning about that. But equally, when we were celebrating Christmas and we were learning about, say, the story of, like, you know, Jesus or whatever, we were learning ourselves. Do you see what I mean? There was like an exchange. This isn't an exchange. This is basically an imposition. As far as I'm concerned, it's an imposition. And I would have hated it if, like, say, one of my like white friends at school had like not been able to like dress up as well. Does that make sense? Do you see what I mean? Like, you know, so what I can dress up.
I was playing devil's. I was just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I think it's one of those things.
I can sort of imagine. I do think, you know, you raised a point about the far right and sort of, you know, as much as you raised the issue there about sort of the way culture's changed and woke culture, if you want to call it that, and so on, and there's been, and also the far right. And, you know, being honest, two things really is one, you know, I probably feel more reticent now than I did 10 years ago to wear an England shirt or to wear, you know, sort of anything Union Jack-esque. I think maybe the Union Jack, you know, you think of all the stuff that's happened in the last 10 years, a lot's happened. And, you know, I don't feel as good about that anymore. Now, would I translate that personally into a situation for other people? Absolutely not. Me personally, no way. So, you know, if a kid, an adult, or anybody else wants to wear an England top, Union Jack top, whatever, absolutely no problem at all. But I can imagine the way some of those teachers reacted to that because they associated it wrongly, in my opinion, but I can see why their thought processes went there with the far right.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Capel Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to capelprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Really? I mean,
Yeah.
I can't at all. Not at all. I mean, good grief. You know, even our new Prime Minister stands in front of the Union flag every day when at the podium and things, you know, so I can't imagine how that association... No, I know.
I can imagine the panic buttons, though. I can see why the panic...
But why would it be a panic button unless that child has actually been racist in some way, shape or form up to that point? I don't see why you would take it in that gesture in that way anyway. And secondly, like I said, it's not the child's fault, but equally, so even if we take the football shirt thing, okay, actually, for some children, that may be such an important part because it might be that your grandfather, your father supported this team, and so do you, and you've gone through like 3 or 4 generations, your great granddad as well. I mean, think about how big
football tops are part of British culture. Again, football tops can be argued to be part of British culture.
You can argue the toss and all sorts of things. Yeah, like my brother's always supported Liverpool because I think he was just glory hunting in the 80s. He didn't want to support Leicester, but fine. But you know, I can imagine, like, if my niece goes along to certain things, I mean, one of the first things he did was, like, buy her a little, like, you know, Liverpool outfit kind of thing, you know, when she was a baby. And it's kind of, you know, these are the things that, like, these things do matter to people. And I don't see why we would associate it with certain things unless we've got good cause to. Secondly, I think this kind of stuff fuels what is, like, the sort of far right to some extent, because they're like, look, we don't get to have a culture, we're being taken over, da-da-da-da. Well, yeah, I can understand it then, because I wouldn't like it if I was on the receiving end of that. And I think we also have to stop and think, hang on, if this was a school in India and a child had turned up like that because it was a cultural day, would it be a problem? Well, no, not really, because that is what would the equivalent be acceptable elsewhere? And the equivalent would be acceptable elsewhere. You know, like, you wouldn't just imagine that you're doing this. I mean, in international school, for example, what would you expect them to do there? You know, you're going to have people coming in with, like, different cultural backgrounds, different, and backgrounds that are European in different ways. And actually, it's up to you, like, how you celebrate that or how you express that. But she wasn't intending. It's not I suppose I don't know what the speech contained, but I mean, unless it was some sort of like, unless it actually did contain something racist, then
the speech has been published. Although I must say, the last couple of sentences of it, in my opinion, were the first 3 paragraphs of it, no issue at all. I think the last few sentences, I haven't got it in front of me, but I think there was some issues with the last bit of it, because it was basically saying something along the lines of, you know, we're not allowed, but it started along those lines of, you know, we need to be allowed to do this and we're not. So there was a bit of that going on. The first 3 paragraphs, I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't have a problem with it.
there are too many people, Tom, in this country who don't particularly like their own cultural heritage. Fair enough, that's fine. But them imposing it on everybody else and them restricting how ethnic minorities interpret that as well, which I think they do, by the way, is also not acceptable. It's not okay to go, actually, you should hate where you're from, you should hate, or you should dislike it because it's all associated with certain things. It's not that straightforward and simple. And don't forget, particularly from like sort of more working class backgrounds, actually, they mix the most like right at the beginning. So for them, it's kind of like, it's a slightly different thing. You know, for a lot of middle class people, it took time before they started marrying like outside of their own culture. So funnily enough, sometimes it's people who are actually the most British in the sense that, you know, their heritage and who they've married and their family, who have the biggest problem with some of this stuff when it comes to ethnic minorities or other groups. It's like that kind of exoticism of these groups of people, right? Like, you know, like kind of, you know, like that argument of Orientalism where you exoticize the other. Well, to some extent, that's what they're doing. And actually, that shouldn't be how the route that we go down, because that in itself is wrong. You know, if you don't know enough about the cultures of these children, fine. But there's ways of finding that out, and there's ways of involving people. For example, through parent groups, that kind of thing, so that you yourselves are aware more. But I think sometimes people who feel uncomfortable with other cultures go almost the opposite way of like almost like exoticizing it and trying to like not, because in themselves they're not comfortable, rather than it being something that is uncomfortable. Do you see what I mean? It's like they've gone the opposite way to almost prove that they're not the thing that they are. Whereas actually the way to like get rid of that discomfort is actually to get to know about these different cultures. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with the children sharing their cultures with each other because they learned, they understand. And I think it was important, for example, like things like the Diwali days and things like that. Like, I think it was good that, you know, that we had that. But for example, like, you know, I remember a Jewish student coming in and talking about something. I can't remember, like, you know, like there was just a special day. But equally for myself, that was important because I wouldn't have known much about Judaism at that point in time, you know. And he came from like a French Jewish background, just randomly. We just happened to have like a French Jewish like kid in the school. But you know, but again, like, you know, learning a bit more about France, learning a bit more about Judaism. There's nothing wrong with the children learning about each other because that actually improves the situation. Whereas this doesn't seem to be coming from that place. It just doesn't seem to be coming from the right place. It makes me feel very uncomfortable, and I would not like to have to run a day like that. I feel really like, no, actually.
I guess all I'm trying to highlight is some of the arguments in terms of, I mean, is it part of British culture to not be like the Americans? They're very different to the Brits, aren't they, in terms of their, you know, celebration of sort of American. America. I mean, when I was there when I was 18, you know, I was like, you know, I did a summer camp, you know, Camp America. And when I went out there, I felt really like, maybe uncomfortable is the wrong word, but every morning they would, you know, have all the kids lined up. They would all put their hands on their chests. They would read the Pledge of Allegiance together. They would then sing the national anthem sometimes. The flag would be raised then in silence every single morning. Okay. Now, to me, as an 18-year-old coming from Birkenhead, right, that was like, I felt uncomfortable. My version of sort of, you know, I guess the sort of, you know, the version of patriotism that is the sort of inner stoicism and sort of very like, you know, sort of taking the mickey out of being British 90% of the time and only really, you know, celebrating it when you have to and not in an outward way. Is that part of British culture? Is it part of British culture to be less sort of outwardly patriotic? I don't know. I feel uncomfortable. I don't feel uncomfortable with everything, but I'm just giving you an example of when I was 18. Would I have felt uncomfortable about it now? Maybe not, actually. But when I was 18, it wasn't something, and that's not because I'm not American. It was the nature of it didn't feel intrinsically sort of normal to me.
But I think you've hit us on a point there, to be honest with you. We have thousands of years of history and culture in our country. I mean, you know, we can trace our roots back to, or some of our festivals, you know, right back to pagan times, for example. And they didn't have that in America. So they had to work to keep their culture and their identity. They were bringing together people from other countries who'd come over to live there, to make America. And so they needed a united thing to stand under. So they created a culture and a heritage. And they have worked really, really hard to maintain that. And actually, here in the UK, we take ours for granted. And as a result of that, we've then...
we're an older country, though. It's
well,
like
it
young
is,
people
but...
have more zest, don't it? It's like, think about the cycle of life. Young people are more zestful. America is still a relatively young country.
But, well, yes, I mean, but I don't think people feel that necessarily. I just think that has been, it's never been something that's been dropped. It's not something, you know, like school assemblies, you know, where we used to sing, you know, sort of hymns with the word God or Jesus in them. All of that's been dropped. We have changed so much in the last probably 20, 30 years, so enormously. We have taken our culture for granted. In fact, we have tried to rewrite our culture and our history in many occasions. And British people, you know, I think people are feeling fed up with the idea that there's no pride in that anymore. And in fact, the pride comes from sort of being anti-British almost. And I think that's a huge problem. And I do think that possibly when the parents got that letter saying, come and celebrate your culture, there will have been some parents who would, like I would have been, like, I haven't got a clue because we have no family connections to a particular football club, which we weren't allowed to wear anyway, no jobs. Look at the child who came as a farmer. Maybe that's been in his family history. Farming is a culture more than a...
I get it. I think coming back, though, to the point I made earlier, which I'd like to hear your views on that thing about it being a hatchet job by the father. You know, I think that has to be put into the mix here. It can't just be seen as, oh, it was an innocent thing and everything's, you know, it was just trying to be.
But if that's the case,
and 11 years old. I don't know. I just.
But it's the school's reaction to what happened that's the issue, isn't it? Let's be honest. Because they hadn't put her in reception, asked him to come and collect her, all of that stuff. I mean, he could not, even if he wanted to provoke something, he could not have created that scenario. And that scenario is not appropriate for a child, you know, who's just wearing an outfit. It's not like, you know, it's not like it had like something. It's not like she wore a T-shirt that was like racist in some way, shape, or form, or had some sort of slogan on it. It is just the flag of Britain. It is just the Union Jack. At the end of the day, it is what it is. Well, if you say it's a stunt to get attention, well, then they didn't have to react the way they did, because it's actually their reaction that created the attention. If you stop and think about it, if they'd just gone, fair enough, go ahead, let's just check through your speech. You know, you didn't tell us, but let's just check through your speech, make sure it's okay. Fine. That could have been the reaction of the school too, couldn't it? Do you see what I mean? Like, that could have been a fair reaction. Not stick you in reception away from all the other children and like call your dad to like come and get you. Like that's quite an extreme thing to do, because you're actually excluding a child at that point. And I think
who's done nothing wrong. Who's done nothing wrong. She put on a dress and she wore it to school and she wrote a speech. It's not like she turned up without fulfilling the other, you know, side of things. She'd obviously thoughtfully written something. I've seen the speech. It looks like something that a child of that age would read as well. It doesn't look like the parents had sort of put up some political statement and said, off you go.
Lucy, can I just say that a bit? Right, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs of it, I didn't have an issue with. Okay, so the first 5, I want to talk about British culture, why it's important. In Britain, we have lots of traditions, including drinking tea, love for talking, royal family, etc. We have amazing history, kings and queens, castles. It's modern, diverse, and always changing. Music, fashion, food. It's also the way we speak, humour, values of fairness, politeness, bloody blah. No real issue there. However, the next bit says, but sometimes at school, we only hear about other cultures, which is great because learning about different countries is interesting and important, but it can feel like being British doesn't count as a culture just because it's the majority. Now, listen, I'm not saying...
Maybe she does feel that. Maybe that sense does come across.
That's a fair point. I think you've got to, like, look, at the end of the day, they've got to... it doesn't matter where your parents are from, or if you yourself were born in a different country, you do still have to be integrated within this one. And actually, there's nothing wrong with celebrating that too, and actually for it to be there. Because I don't think that this helps. I don't think it helps the way that sometimes we go about things. So, for example, I was working in a school once, which had like a very small sort of Roma Gypsy community, right? Really small. And Irish travelling, I should say. And actually, they put up this massive display, but they didn't put up a display for anybody else's cultural background. And yeah, it did cause resentment, because it's like, well, what about us then? You know, and this was from a mixed school where you had Asian children, you had children from Afro-Caribbean background, you had like white British children. And actually, it did feel a bit like, well, why aren't we celebrating what everybody does? Why is there just this one display with them? Because you're then highlighting that as being special, and actually it's not the only thing that's special. You know, we've got to think about how these things actually come across, the impact they have, and not just do them for the sake of it. There's nothing wrong with them having boards with all the different cultures on, or like explaining different cultures. I wouldn't have a problem with that, but I would feel uncomfortable if there was nothing about Britain there. And that's a fair point. It's fair criticism, which the school should have taken on board. It's like, actually, what about our heritage? I mean, even like say, you know, like I know some people have issues with British values, but I don't have a problem with teaching. I think it's fair enough that we do have things that make us special as people in Britain, and that we should recognise that, and we should integrate people into that, rather than having these like little like groups, you know, like, I mean, I know Keir Starmer's like gone back on it, but even he said, we're turning into an island of strangers. Well, why is that happening? When I was working for an asylum seeker charity, by the way, one of the things that we did was we went out of our way to integrate them into British culture. We went out of our way. It wasn't just that of course we acknowledge their cultures too. We felt it was really important that these people, if they're going to live here, if they're going to be part of it, they understand what's going on around them. And that was a really important thing. And I think that they would not have liked it if we had just spent the entire time talking about culture. They wanted to know more about Britain. They wanted to know about our way of life and how to fit in to some extent. And I think that's fine. Because
again, though, I suppose it depends how positively you view British culture, doesn't it? It sort of that as well. Because I might not have as positive a view as some others on British culture and what it is. I'm not sort of hating on it, or anything like that. It's just, I suppose it depends how people view British culture, doesn't it? From within and beyond. How it's
well, you've nailed it, haven't you? This is exactly it. The teachers at that school probably felt the same way. British culture's rubbish. We don't like it. We're ashamed of it. Let's celebrate other cultures instead. No. But no, I'm saying, is that how they felt? Do people look? Because we know that there are lots of people.
That's what I brought up earlier. That's why I said to you, it wouldn't surprise me if that's what triggered some of the teachers. That's what I said. I said that's the view, but I'm saying that is that I don't know.
If you genuinely feel like that, right? If you genuinely feel like that, and about like, because if you felt like that about another culture, you wouldn't be considered to be worthy of being a teacher. Now, if you're going to teach white British children, I'm sorry, I don't think you can go about saying that hating on white British culture. I think you've got to be in your own life, fine, but you can't go out there and do that, because it'd be wrong if you did that to, say, an Indian child or a child from an Afro-Caribbean background. It's the same difference. Why are you teaching those children then? If you hate it, why are you there? Why don't you work in a school where it is pretty much all ethnic minorities have done with? Like genuinely, I think we've got to say that there's equality is a thing, and it means all people should be treated with respect, regardless whether you like it. Now, there might be aspects of other cultures that people don't like. For example, they may not like the idea of arranged marriages or something. Not that happens as much, but they may not like it, fine. But then I would recommend you don't work in a school where children from that who are from that sort of background exist. So, because if it's going to bother you that much, so I think it's the same thing, isn't it? If it's going to bother you, any kind of like outward patriotism of being British, then don't work in a school where there are white British children. Simple as that.
Yeah, but that suggests that all white British children have a positive view about British culture.
No, but my point is, you wouldn't go out. Yeah, but not all children from an Indian background have got like a positive view of being Indian. Not all people from like a Muslim background would have a positive view of being Muslim. Not every.
You're saying that if a teacher doesn't have a positive view of British culture, they shouldn't be working in a school with any white British kids in it.
No, what I'm saying is, if you've got that negative a connotation, if you genuinely think everything about British culture is racist, whatever, that is an extreme. I'm not saying that you have to personally think positively. What I mean is that if you can't see it in a balanced way, positive and negative, because there'll always be bits of each, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, all cultures have got positive and negative aspects to them. They all have them. Including my own sort of Indian background, but also the British side of things. Yeah, I think there's positive and negative things here as well. My point is, if you cannot be balanced about it, if you're completely negative, then actually that's not the right place for you, is it? Like if it triggers you that much, the Union Jack, genuinely.
Some of this also comes down to whether you can separate your professional work in a school from your personal views or ideologies or whatever, and just not bring that into. I mean, for me, I wouldn't know. Like I said to you earlier, in that situation, I mean, I wouldn't think to do it anyway, because my personal views aren't necessarily extremely negative or extremely positive. They're just maybe somewhere in the middle, right? But certainly, even if they were more negative, I wouldn't bring any of that in. It's sort. I would see that more as my duty as a teacher to not bring that into that.
When my children were at school, we had the royal wedding, 2011, 2010 or sometime. We had the Olympic torch. The Queen came and visited here, and every single time it was a big celebration in the school.
Yeah,
they wrote letters. Sorry?
That's not true. Yeah, okay.
But
the thing about that is there's a huge number of ethnic minorities who also voted, which people like to pretend away and forget, actually.
Yeah, but I'm trying to explain why, for me,
but that's a choice.
So Brexit's made you anti-British.
It certainly made me reassess my. In a way, yeah. It's made me more. It's not made me anti-British as a statement of fact. It's made me more anti-British than I was before. Yeah, because it did. I won't go into the whys because
no, that's fine. But one of the things. So when I worked again in primary education, there was one of the teachers had British values on his wall, and other teachers went, well, that's a really good thing. Can we have a copy of that? And a copy went out to all the different classrooms, and British values are supposed to be being taught in schools. We are supposed to be sharing what it means to be British. And that isn't just for white kids whose grandfathers and beyond are British. That's for all the children who live in Britain, because this is their home. This is where their families have chosen to live. We live here by default. People have chosen to live here, and we should be proud of that, and they should be proud to live here. So it really I find it quite jaw-dropping that you're sort of saying it's what made me anti-British, because that's quite a revelation to me.
It made me less of a feeling of being proud to be British and being positive about being British. Yes, it did, and I totally stand by that. I don't think that's jaw-dropping. Something happened that I really felt was just on every level against sort of what I personally see as lots of the positive things about my feelings for being British. So I don't think it's jaw-dropping to suggest that after Brexit, my perception of my positivity towards being British went down, because it did. I don't know why that's jaw-dropping.
But the thing is, it is a bit, because if to be perfectly honest, I think there's a lot of people, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily you as well. However, if you'd studied like European Union politics like I did, it didn't even shock me that we left. It didn't change my opinion. As far as I'm concerned, from the age of from when I did my degree, I pretty much figured we were going to leave at some point. Like, just given our relationship with the EU and how we'd interacted with it, it just would not surprise me. And also, there are conditions under which I myself would have voted for Brexit. I wouldn't have voted for it at that point in time, and I didn't. However, I can see there being a scenario, for example,
I can, but I'm also entitled to say that I can see why.
Yeah, that's fine.
I would disagree with those reasons, but I can see why they are valid arguments to make. But it's.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Capel Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to capelprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
But that was a choice that some people made because they weren't willing to listen to what the arguments actually were. And I think there's been a lot of projection onto people. And like I said, the fact that there was I think something like, what was it? I don't know if it was a quarter or a third, something like that. But there was a significant number of ethnic minorities who also voted that way, right? So it wasn't like it was just like this one group of people. However, I do think that there's been this kind of real negativity towards this decision, which is only one decision. Right, despite the fact
it's one decision that has literally changed the shape of the country. It's changed everything. It has.
That's because some people have chosen.
It's just one decision, but it's cataclysmic in terms of what it's done.
I think we have to be careful because this isn't supposed to be a Brexit conversation, and I'm not going to start wading in and talking about Brexit. But
started by saying in 2010, 2011, 2012, and you gave examples of the London Olympics, the William and Kate getting married, and so. I just made the point that a lot of things have happened since then that have changed people's perception or their positivity towards being British, and that might be a short-term thing. And you found that jaw-dropping that somebody could have a more negative perception based on events like Brexit. So we don't have to talk about the ins and outs of Brexit.
But you say more negative, so you were already negative about Britain anyway.
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. I said less positive than before, more negative. That's what I meant.
But again, the issue is still this, though, Tom. You're not allowed to bring that into schools. You do have a responsibility. But my point is, it has been brought in this situation.
Yeah, sure.
It's not let's just go on to the point that actually, if you exclude a child, there should be a really good reason for excluding a child. If you stop and think about it, you cannot go into it like this. This seems just bizarre to me. It's bizarre that the school would even choose to exclude on this basis. And that is what happened to that person. And actually, it's not okay. I don't think we can go around excluding children based on the fact that they might wear something related to the Union Jack. I mean, when we had the last celebration of the Queen's, I can't remember which Jubilee it was, but essentially it was actually what we were doing was we all went out, had a picnic. I was wearing Union Jack earrings. I bought a pair for my TA as well. We were all wearing red, white, and blue. Actually, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong. But what I wouldn't want to do is to say, oh well, the ethnic minority children shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? It goes down a certain route sometimes. It's this way of thinking, and actually, it's not appropriate, and it doesn't help. And but I do think some people like the idea of these little silos because it makes them feel comfortable, as opposed to the fact that we are going to have to be a bit more of a melting pot, and we already are in many ways, and we should just be encouraged to see the culture in a balanced way, by all means, but just to be able to see that. But if we're going to go completely negative, then as far as I'm concerned, we're going to fuel the far right. That's going to make it way worse. And these kind of stories don't help because it is such an unreasonable thing to do to that child. It just was.
Yeah. Absolutely spot on. And I mean, where I was saying about the school organised those celebrations, come wearing red, white and blue, things like that. We do still do things like that, but there must be a trailing off if there are teachers and people who now believe less in Britain and would be less inclined to mark those days. And for those children who would enjoy those days and would enjoy wearing a red dress with a blue cardigan and white hair bubbles, they don't get that chance anymore. So we can't let those political views cloud children's opportunity to learn about and learn to love the country that they live in. That's what I think.
And not everybody has to, but I do think that what we can't do is suppress it. Do you see what I mean? If you make a choice that you're not happy, fine, because there's going to be people who don't enjoy being British as much as other people, because it's inevitable. It's like that would happen in any country, in any part of the world. But what you don't have in other parts of the world, or at least, certain things are happening as a result of sort of more woke thinking, but what they're doing is encouraging, particularly in Western countries, a kind of hatred, and that's not appropriate either. Like, we shouldn't be forcing it one way or the other.
I mean, I wasn't suggesting that I now hate Britain, whereas before I loved Britain. I wasn't suggesting that. I was just making the point that events that happen and things that happen can colour someone's feelings towards their own country. In a common sense, balanced way, it can colour how you feel about your country, the things that you feel, and it is a personal opinion. It's not an opinion to force on anybody else, but my opinion and my feelings. It has coloured my feelings towards my own nationality and whatever. And that's not to say that I don't care about the country anymore. I don't care about any of the people in it, or I don't care whatever, or I hate it. Absolutely, obviously not. But yeah, it's definitely, it affects things. It's like if something positive happens, that then affects it, doesn't it? If I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't really. But something really, really positive would obviously colour people's views really positively, and maybe produce a wave of patriotism. But I do think that things have happened in the last 10 years that have maybe made some people think more negatively about their own country.
I think most people are just getting on with their lives, to be honest, and trying to make the best that they can. But I mean, I feel very sad that that's sort of, I've never heard anyone articulate that, I suppose, in quite that way. So
is that a bad thing to say?
Yeah, I think to dislike the country that you live in.
I didn't say dislike. I didn't say dislike the country. I'm going to use the quote again that I said it made me feel less positive about the country, about the nationality of the Britishness. That's what certain events have made me feel less positive. I didn't say I hate it, didn't say I dislike it, but it's made me feel less positive. It's made me feel more skeptical. It's made me feel more less wanting to like you say, show the love of the country and all this stuff. It has coloured that, but that doesn't affect
what schools shouldn't be doing and what teachers shouldn't be doing. If they're entitled to their own personal views, what they shouldn't be doing is creating a kind of cultural clash here where I prefer other cultures. Fine, if you prefer other cultures, that's up to you. But actually generating that into a scenario in a school is inappropriate.
But Tarjinder, this is exactly my point, is that I would never do that, right? So that's the difference, is that I'm saying, my personal views or what I feel at a given moment isn't really relevant to how I would approach any situation within the school I currently teach in, because that's different, and that it's a professional environment, and I wouldn't sort of block people from doing things or tell them to do things. It's like, it's that's how I view it. But yeah, it was a good discussion though. It was a good discussion.
It was.
I'm sure there'll be more to come, because that was. I mean, it has made the news, hasn't it? It's certainly. I don't think it's going to stop. I think one of you said earlier, there's probably going to be more examples of this. I would imagine there probably will be.
I think schools just need to bear this in mind. I think they need to look at it, and I think Tarjinder summed it up really well. You need to look why you want to hold an event, and what you want the pupils to learn from it. And then I think on top of that, you need to think about the scenarios that might come up where somebody wears something you didn't want them to wear. And it's not about filling in a form necessarily, but it's just about being more clear with direction about what people should do. If you have a culture or a cultural identity or something, if you're from a family of Morris dancers, please come and bring the bells. Or
is it
do you
better
see
to
what I mean?
not have culture days?
Well, no, because it's interesting. It's kids are learning about things. The way we did it when I was at that primary school was beautiful, because the teacher really, really loved India. She knew so much about it, and she really shared with absolute passion with a class of, I'm trying to think now, almost entirely white British children, the beauty of India and the wonderful things. And she had sort of examples. She didn't wear anything, but she brought in saris and things and showed them the beautiful embroidery. And do you see what I mean? Those kind of things are really important. They're valuable, but maybe we need to approach them differently and always consider, are we going to leave people out? That's the important thing.
Guys, I think that's a really good place to finish. We were going to do a second story. We haven't got time for the second story. We just overhit. This is the problem whenever I'm on this thing. It just never goes how it should go, but whatever. I will say a massive thanks again to John Catt Educational, who are publishers of professional books and resources that support great teaching and learning, and they sponsor all Teachers Talk radio shows, and we really appreciate them. So thank you, John Catt. Head over to the John Catt Bookshop, johncattbookshop.com, to find out more. And of course, I don't know whether you've heard of this podcast, guys, by Anna Stokey, called Chalk and Talk. But if you haven't heard of it and you're involved in education, then check out Chalk and Talk, the podcast by Anna Stokey. She's based in Canada. She's a big fan of evidence-informed practice. She has a huge podcast audience and a great podcast, and it's one that I've been listening to recently that's been fantastic. So if you have the time to head over there to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and check out the Chalk and Talk podcast, then definitely do that. Lucy and Tarjinder, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back again next Sunday, and we'll see what's happening in the next week in education. Maybe it'll be quieter because everybody's finished, and if you've finished, congratulations, and have a great summer. But we will be back in next Sunday to discuss anything that has happened in the world of education in that time. Cheers, everybody. Take care.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.